Hi, it's Lori from Imagine That by Lori, and if you're a beginner or want to start loom knitting, this is the video for you. From one beginner to another, I'm going to tell you the ins and outs of loom knitting. My first project was a stealer blanket for my husband, and it went extremely well. I learned along the way, and I'm going to tell you what tools you need to start loom knitting. You see, I changed colors. I learned how to count rows, count stitches. I learned how to do a garter stitch for a border. The bulk of the blanket is done with a knit stitch, and I'm going to teach you how to do this. It's so easy. If you start now, you'll definitely have a Christmas gift. Okay, what do I need to start this project? Well, you definitely need a loom, and I like this one. I'll link it in my links up top for Amazon. That's where I got this one. You need some yarn. Definitely need yarn. You got to learn a little bit about yarn though. You learn that it comes in different weights, and this is a medium. This is basically your standard. I got this at Joann's, and it's a really soft, and it's called Big Twist. So there's yarn. You'll want to know the weight of the yarn because it depends on how bulky it is, for how big your stitches are, for how big your blanket's going to be. I'll talk a little bit more about blanket size a little later in this tutorial, but let's get started on what are some nifty little tools that you need to get started and to make life simpler. Well, I found a couple things. You saw on my blanket that it was striped, so you have to know how many rows of stripes that you're doing so everything lines up. Well, I found this little counter, and this thing was a lifesaver. Again, I will link it. You can wear it as a ring. I just laid it beside me, and every time I finish a row, I click my counter, and you can reset it by pushing this little button, and it was so helpful. Oops, for some reason I can't get it to reset. That's okay. Next thing I found was if you're going to change direction, because you don't want to cross these, or you're going to have a tube instead of a blanket. So this is my beginning and my ending. I'm marking green. However, when I did it, I just used nail polish because I saw a lot of people doing that. Along the way, though, I found the little stitch markers, and I thought that I'd buy those instead. Also, this is where my pattern changed. I marked them with purple, or again, nail polish. So those two items definitely help for you. The next thing you have to figure out is based on what type of yarn you buy, and I showed you a number 4. This next project that I'm going to start with you, I'm using a number 3. You have to figure out how many pegs you need for the size of the blanket that you want to make. The blanket that I made for my husband, I used the entire loom, and that gave me about 58 inches wide. So let's talk about that. I did some calculations, which I will put on here for you, on how I figured out how big my blanket needed to be. The first thing I did was I make a little swatch, and then I measure it based on the number of looms that I use, and I can kind of figure out how many pegs per inch. Swatches are great because yarn is different, and as you stitch, you'll see that it does make a huge difference on the size of your blanket. So here's a couple quick calculations that I did. Using the 4-inch yarn, my stealer blanket, I found a crib blanket used 154 pegs, a receiving blanket used 137 pegs, a throw blanket used the entire loom, and the Afghan used the entire loom. Now, when I switch over to my new project, I'm only using a number 3 weighted yarn, so I had to do a little more calculations. For number 3 yarn, I found that the crib blanket is 164 pegs, the receiving 146, throw blanket 183, and the Afghan 183. There's 199 pegs, so if you're going to get into the throw blankets and the Afghan, you might as well just use the whole loom. So it's only like a couple inches more. So those are my calculations that I did. I highly recommend that you do a swatch and figure out how many pegs per inch so you can make the blanket the exact size that you'd like. Now that I've given you a quick overview of some tools that'll help you, skip over to my next video and we are going to get started on this project. I'm making this tutorial for my nephew. My little nephew saw me loom knitting when I stopped by to visit him on vacation, and he wanted to learn how to knit. My sister-in-law got him his little loom, so I want to make sure that he gets started on his project, and anyone else that really wants to learn how to loom knit, beginner to beginner, I got you.